Captain Jake Morrison walked slowly across the bridge of his ship. The metal floor under his boots made small creaking sounds with each step. He was 52 years old and had spent the last 15 years commanding the UES Defiant. The ship was old, much older than most vessels flying through space these days. Her hull was thick steel-painted gray, with patches and repairs covering her surface like scars. Through the main window, Jake could see the most beautiful ships he had ever laid eyes on. The alien diplomatic fleet moved through space like dancers in the darkness. The Zephyrian cruisers looked like they were made of pure crystal, catching and bending the light from distant stars. Their hulls were smooth and curved, nothing like the boxy, practical design of human ships. The Meridian vessels were even stranger. They looked alive, with surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with their own inner light. Jake's ship looked like junk next to them. The Defiant was built 30 years ago when humans barely understood how to travel between stars. Back then, Earth's best engineers had done their best with what they knew. They built her thick and strong, like the old battleships that once sailed Earth's oceans. But compared to alien technology, she might as well have been made of wood, and Nails. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her station, watching the alien ships on her screen. She was 28 years old and had joined the Defiance crew 2 years ago. Most officers her age wanted to serve on the newer ships, the ones with better technology and more comfortable quarters. Amy had volunteered for this assignment because she believed the old ship still had value. "Captain," Amy said without looking up from her controls, "the Council ships are keeping their usual formation. They have not sent us any messages or even acknowledged our escort signal." Jake nodded and settled into his captain's chair. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, and the armrest had a coffee stain that no amount of cleaning could remove. "Cannot blame them for ignoring us," he said. "To them, we probably look like an ancient museum piece limping through space." The diplomatic mission had been going on for 3 days now. The Galactic Council was holding an important meeting about trade agreements and territorial disputes. Dozens of species would be represented, including humanity. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 30 years, making humans the newest members by far. Most alien races had been traveling between stars for hundreds or even thousands of years. A loud clang echoed through the bridge as Chief Engineer Ben Carter climbed up through the maintenance hatch. His gray coveralls were stained with grease and coolant fluid. Ben was 61 years old and had been working on the Defiant since the day she first left Earth's orbit. He knew every pipe, wire, and bolt on the ship. If something broke, Ben could fix it with spare parts and determination. "Captain," Ben said, wiping his hands on an old rag, "I have been thinking about those modifications we talked about last month, the ones that headquarters said we could not afford." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean the experimental power system upgrades? The ones that would cost more than this ship is worth?" Ben grinned, showing teeth stained by years of drinking. "Engine room coffee. What if I told you I have been working on them anyway? In my spare time, of course, using parts I found here and there." This got Jake's attention. Ben Carter was not the type of man to joke about technical matters. If he said he had been working on something, then it was probably already half-built and tested. "What kind of modifications are we talking about?" Jake asked. Ben pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The engineering diagrams were hand-drawn and covered with notes in Ben's messy handwriting. "Well, I started with the fusion reactor. The original design was built to last, but it was never built to perform. I figured out a way to increase power output by 30% without compromising safety. And Jake could tell there was more. I also worked on the magnetic field generators. You know those mining equipment parts we picked up at the Titan station 6 months ago? I converted them into defensive field projectors. And the main cannon ... Ben's grin got wider. Let me just say, the thing was designed to shoot chunks of metal really fast. I found a way to make it shoot them even faster. Amy turned around, in her chair to listen. She had heard rumors about Ben's secret projects, but this was the first time he had talked about them openly. Ben, Jake said carefully, are you telling me you have been rebuilding this ship without telling anyone? Not rebuilding, Ben corrected, improving. Using human engineering principles that these fancy alien ships do not understand. They build for elegance and efficiency. We build things that work no matter what happens to them. Jake looked out at the alien fleet again. Those beautiful ships represented the peak of galactic technology. They were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything humans could build. But there was something to be said for the human approach to engineering. When everything else failed, human equipment usually kept working. How long would it take to bring these modifications online? Jake asked. Most of them are already installed, Ben admitted. I just need to connect a few more power couplings and run some final tests. Maybe 4 or 5 hours of work. And you are sure they will not blow up the ship? Ben shrugged. Pretty sure. I have been testing components for months. The biggest risk is that we might generate more power than our systems can handle. But I built in safety measures for that too. Jake thought about it. The Defiant was assigned to escort duty, which meant flying in formation and looking official. They were not expected to actually do anything important. The alien ships had their own weapons and defenses. If trouble came, the human ship would probably be told to stay back and let the professionals handle it. But Jake had been in space long enough to know that trouble had a way of finding you when you least expected it. And when that happened, he would rather have too much capability than too little. Do it, Jake decided, but keep it quiet. If headquarters finds out, we have been modifying systems without authorization. We will all be flying cargo haulers for the rest of our careers. Ben nodded and headed back toward the maintenance hatch. You will not regret this, Captain. This old girl has more fight in her than people think. As Ben disappeared below decks, Jake turned back to watch the alien fleet. They moved with perfect precision and grace, their advanced computers calculating optimal flight paths and energy consumption. It was impressive to watch, but Jake had learned something important during his years in command. The most dangerous opponent was not always the one with the best equipment. Sometimes it was the one nobody was paying attention to. 3 days had passed since the diplomatic convoy entered the Kronos Nebula. The massive cloud of gas and dust stretched for millions of miles in every direction, creating a colorful display of purple and gold that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But Jake Morrison knew that beauty in space often meant danger. The nebula interfered with sensors and communication systems. Radio signals that normally traveled instantly across the galaxy now took minutes to reach their destination. The alien ships had to rely on short-range scanners that could barely see past their own hulls. It was like flying blind through a cosmic storm. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiant, studying the tactical display. His ship's primitive radar system was actually working better than the advanced alien sensors. Human technology had been built for Earth's harsh electromagnetic environments, where solar storms and atmospheric interference were constant problems. The conditions that crippled alien systems barely affected his equipment. Captain Amy Rodriguez called from her station. I am picking up some strange readings on the edge of our sensor range. The signals are very faint, but they do not match any known ship types. Jake moved to look over her shoulder. The display showed dozens of small contacts moving in coordinated patterns around the convoy. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, just at the limit of detection. How many? Jake asked. Hard to say, sir. The nebula is interfering with everything. but I count at least 50 contacts, maybe more. Amy's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the concern underneath Dot in the engine room. Ben Carter was putting the finishing touches on his secret modifications. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he connected the last power coupling to the main reactor. The improvements he had made over the past months were finally ready for testing. He just hoped they would not need to test them. Commander Lisa Parker commanded the diplomatic convoy from her position aboard the Zephyrian flagship. Her species had been exploring space for over 2,000 years, and their ships represented some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The crystalline hull of her vessel could absorb and redirect energy weapons, while her engines could push the ship to speeds that human minds could barely comprehend. But right now, her advanced sensors were nearly useless. The nebula's interference made it impossible to see more than a few thousand miles in any direction. She had to rely on the formation flying skills of her pilots and hope that nothing dangerous was hiding in the cosmic fog. That hope died when the first enemy ships dropped their cloaking fields. The attack came without warning. One moment, space around the convoy was empty except for swirling gas clouds. The next moment, over 200 warships materialized from nowhere, their weapons already charging for the first strike. The hegemony had been planning this ambush for months. They were a military alliance of species that opposed human membership in the Galactic Council. To them, humans were primitive barbarians who had no place among civilized races. The diplomatic convoy represented everything they hated about the Council's policy of inclusion. All ships emergency scatter formation. Commander Parker broadcast across all frequencies. Her training took over as the first plasma bolt streaked past her ship. We are under attack by hegemony forces. The diplomatic ships were built for speed and comfort, not warfare. Their shields flickered under the first enemy barrage, and several vessels immediately reported hull damage. The beautiful crystalline hulls that looked so impressive in peacetime offered little protection against military-grade weapons. Jake watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The Defiant's ancient radar system gave him a clearer picture of the fight than any of the alien commanders possessed. He could see the enemy ships moving into attack positions, cutting off escape routes, and concentrating fire on the most important diplomatic vessels. "Sir," Amy reported, her voice tight with concentration, "I count 217 enemy ships. They have us completely surrounded. The diplomatic vessels are taking heavy damage." Jake had seen enough space battles to know how this would end. The convoy had perhaps 10 minutes before the enemy overwhelmed their defenses. After that, it would be a massacre. "Communications," Jake ordered. "Send a message to the convoy. Tell them to form up behind us. We are taking point." Danny Walsh, the communications officer, looked at his captain with surprise. "Sir, are you sure? Those enemy ships outgun us by a factor of 20 to 1. "Just send the message," Jake replied. Calmly. In her command center, Commander Parker received the human transmission with disbelief. The primitive escort vessel was volunteering to lead the defense against impossible odds. It was either the bravest or most foolish gesture she had ever witnessed. "Human vessel," she transmitted back, "your offer is appreciated, but your ship lacks the capability to engage this many enemies. Recommend you withdraw to minimum safe distance." Jake's response was immediate. "Commander, with respect, you do not know what this ship is capable of. My chief engineer has some surprises ready for testing." Ben Carter chose that moment to contact the bridge. "Captain, all modifications are online and ready. I should warn you, we have never tested these systems under combat conditions. There could be unexpected side effects." "Understood, Chief," Jake replied. "Amy, plot an intercept course for the lead enemy formation. Full power to engines." The Defiant began to accelerate toward the hegemony fleet at a speed that should have been impossible for a ship of her age and design. But Ben's modifications had reinforced her structure and upgraded her engines far beyond original specifications. Admiral Vector commanded the Hegemony attack fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. He had studied human military capabilities for years and dismissed them as irrelevant. Human technology was decades behind galactic standards. Their ships were slow, clumsy, and weak-dot, so when his sensors detected the human escort vessel charging directly at his fleet, he initially assumed it was a malfunction. No human commander would be foolish enough to attack a force this size with a single outdated ship. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the human vessel is accelerating beyond predicted capabilities. Energy readings suggest significant modifications to their power systems." Vector studied the display with growing interest. Perhaps these humans had more surprises than he had anticipated. It would not matter in the end, but it might provide some entertainment before the inevitable conclusion. "Focus fire on the human ship," he ordered. "Let us see what their primitive technology can accomplish against superior firepower." The first enemy salvo streaked toward the Defiant like a swarm of angry stars. The first enemy weapons hit the Defiant like lightning bolts from an angry god. Plasma beams that could melt through the hull of any normal ship struck the old vessel's armor plating and simply disappeared. Instead of burning through metal and killing the crew inside, the energy was absorbed by magnetic field generators that Ben Carter had built from mining equipment. Jake Morrison felt the ship shudder under the impact, but the lights stayed on and the air kept flowing. On his tactical display, he watched as the absorbed energy flowed into the ship's power grid, making all systems run faster and stronger. "Chief," Jake called down to the engine room, "your modifications are working better than expected." Ben's voice crackled back through the communication system. "Captain, the magnetic fields are holding, but I am reading power levels that should not be possible. The fusion reactor is running at 160% of maximum design capacity. Will it hold together? I honestly do not know. Sir, we are in completely unknown territory here." Amy Rodriguez watched her instruments with amazement as more enemy fire struck their ship. Each hit made their systems stronger instead of weaker. The main engines were now pushing the Defiant at speeds that made the crew feel pressed back into their seats. "Captain," Amy reported, "we are moving 3 times faster than our maximum rated speed. The enemy ships cannot match our acceleration." Jake smiled grimly as he watched the Hegemony formation trying to adjust to their attack. The alien commanders had expected to face a slow, lumbering human vessel. Instead, they were trying to track a ship that moved like a missile and seemed to grow stronger with every hit. On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Vector stared at his tactical display in growing confusion. His most powerful weapons were striking the human ship directly, but instead of destroying it, they seemed to be making it more dangerous. "Report," he demanded from his weapons officer. "Sir, our plasma cannons are hitting their target, but the energy is being absorbed somehow. The human ship is actually accelerating toward our main formation." Vector had fought battles across half the galaxy. He had defeated fleets and conquered star systems. But he had never seen anything like this. Increase firepower. Use the heavy particle beams. The Hegemony dreadnought's main weapons charged with enough energy to destroy a small moon. The particle beam that lashed out at the Defiant should have vaporized the entire ship in an instant. Instead, the beam struck the magnetic barriers around the hull and was redirected into the ship's weapon systems. Deep inside the Defiant, the main cannon began to charge with power that far exceeded its original design. The weapon had been built to fire chunks of metal at high speed, a simple kinetic bombardment system. But with the energy from enemy weapons feeding into it, the old cannon became something entirely different. "Amy," Jake ordered, "target their flagship. Let us show them what human engineering can do." Amy locked her targeting system onto the massive Hegemony dreadnought. The ship was 5 times larger than the Defiant, with armor thick enough to stop any normal weapon. But the round that erupted from the human ship's main cannon was traveling at nearly the speed of light. The kinetic projectile struck the enemy flagship like the fist of an angry giant. It punched completely through the bow. Armor traveled the entire length of the ship and emerged from the stern engines in a shower of metal fragments. The dreadnought's lights flickered and died as critical systems failed throughout the vessel. "Impossible," Admiral Vectar whispered as damage reports flooded his command center. His flagship, the pride of the Hegemony fleet, had been crippled by a single shot from a primitive human weapon. But Jake was not finished. The Defiant spun through space like a dancer, bringing its secondary weapons to bear on the surrounding enemy ships. Laser cutters that had been designed for industrial work sliced through advanced alien armor as if it were made of paper. Mining. Charges converted into torpedoes exploded against enemy hulls with devastating effect. The Hegemony fleet found itself facing something they had never encountered before. Human weapons were not elegant or sophisticated. They were crude, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Where alien ships relied on energy shields and advanced materials, humans simply built things strong enough to keep working, no matter what happened to them. Commander Lisa Parker watched the battle from her position with the diplomatic convoy. Her crystalline ship had been designed by some of the greatest minds in Zephyrian history. Its weapons could bend space and time to strike targets at impossible ranges. But she had never seen anything as purely destructive as the human vessel, tearing through the enemy formation. "How are they doing this?" her tactical officer asked in amazement. "I do not know," Lisa replied honestly. "Human technology should not be capable of such performance." The answer was simple, though none of the aliens understood it yet. Humans did not build their ships to impress anyone or to demonstrate technological superiority. They built them to survive and fight in the worst possible conditions. When everything else failed, human equipment kept working. Ben Carter understood this better than anyone. He had spent his entire career maintaining and improving systems that other species would have replaced years ago. He knew that the best technology was not always the newest or most advanced. Sometimes it was simply the kind that refused to quit. "Captain," Ben's voice echoed through the bridge, "I am reading stress. Fractures in the hull plating. These power levels are pushing us beyond safe limits." "How much longer can we maintain this?" Jake asked. "Unknown, sir. But I suggest we finish this fight quickly, before something critical fails." Jake looked at his tactical display. The Defiant had already destroyed or disabled over 30 enemy ships, but there were still more than 150 vessels in the Hegemony fleet. The diplomatic convoy was safe for now, but the battle was far from over. "Amy, plot a course through their main formation. We are going to show them what happens when you corner a human ship." The Defiant changed course, diving toward the heart of the enemy fleet like a shark sensing blood in the water. The Defiant plunged into the heart of the Hegemony fleet like a wolf attacking a flock of sheep. What followed was unlike any space battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. While alien ships preferred to fight at long range with elegant energy weapons and sophisticated tactics, the human vessel fought like humanity had always fought, up close, brutal, and with complete disregard for what should have been possible. Jake Morrison gripped his captain's chair as the ship spun through a series of maneuvers that would have torn apart any normal vessel. But Ben Carter's modifications had reinforced the Defiant structure with materials salvaged from mining operations and cargo haulers. The old ship could take punishment that would destroy newer, more advanced vessels. "Amy, 3 enemy cruisers. Are trying to box us in on the starboard side? Jake called out over the noise of weapons fire and straining engines. I see them, Captain, Amy Rodriguez replied, her fingers dancing across her control panel. Targeting solutions locked in. Ben, I need more power to the port thrusters. Can you give me anything extra? Ben's voice crackled through the communication system from deep in the engine room. Already done, sir. I have got the reactor running at 170% of maximum safe output. We are well beyond anything this ship was designed to handle. There is no such thing as safe in a fight like this. Jake grinned as he threw the Defiant into a spinning dive that brought all their weapons to bear on the enemy formation. The human ship did not fight like the aliens expected. Their computers had calculated optimal attack patterns based on standard galactic warfare doctrine. They expected long-range exchanges of fire, careful positioning, and gradual wearing down of enemy defenses. Instead, the Defiant fought like a street brawler in a bar fight. The ship rolled and twisted through space, using the nebula's gas clouds for cover while striking at enemy vessels from unexpected angles. When 3 hegemony destroyers tried to surround the human ship, Jake flew directly between them, firing in all directions at once. The maneuver should have been suicide, but the Defiant's weapons tore holes in all 3 enemy hulls before they could react. Admiral Vector watched from his damaged flagship as his carefully planned battle formation fell apart. The human ship was not following any recognized tactical doctrine. It moved like something alive, striking where his forces were weakest and disappearing before they could concentrate their firepower. Sir, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic. We have lost 47 ships. The human vessel appears to be targeting our command and control vessels specifically. Vector studied the battle display and realized the officer was correct. The primitive human ship was not attacking randomly. It was systematically destroying the ships that coordinated his fleet's movements. Without proper communication and command structure, his 200 vessels were becoming a confused mob. How is this possible? He demanded. Their technology is decades behind ours. Their ship should have been destroyed in the first minute of combat. But Jake Morrison was not fighting with technology alone. He was fighting with 30 years of experience in space combat, supported by a crew that knew their ship better than any computer program. When alien commanders relied on tactical algorithms and battle computers, the humans fought with pure instinct and adaptability. Rodriguez, those 4 battle cruisers are forming up for a coordinated attack, Jake observed, watching the enemy ships move into position. I see them, sir. They are trying to create a crossfire pattern that will catch US no matter which way we turn. Then we will not turn, Jake decided. We go straight through the middle. Ben, can you give me maximum power to forward shields? Captain, we do not have forward shields, Ben reminded him. We have those magnetic field generators, but they were never designed for direct assault. Make them work, Jake ordered. We are about to find out just how strong human engineering really is. The Defiant accelerated directly toward the center of the enemy formation. The 4 hegemony battlecruisers opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of plasma and particle beams that should have vaporized any ship foolish enough to fly into it. Instead, the magnetic fields around the human vessel absorbed the incoming energy and fed it back into the ship's systems. The Defiant emerged from the inferno of enemy fire, moving faster than ever, its weapons supercharged with power stolen from its attackers. The main cannon, now operating at energy levels that would have been impossible with its original power source, fired a projectile that punched through 2 battle cruisers at once. Secondary weapons that had been cobbled together from industrial equipment sliced through advanced alien armor like it was made of thin plastic. Dr. Helen Kim watched the impossible battle from the bridge of the lead diplomatic vessel. She was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, a position that required her to maintain dignity and diplomatic composure at all times. But as she watched her species' forgotten warship tear through an entire enemy fleet, she found herself cheering, like a spectator at a sporting event. "I never imagined," she whispered to Commander Lisa Parker. "I never knew we could fight like that." Lisa's crystalline features showed an expression that might have been respect or fear. "Your species builds their machines differently than we do. We create technology to be efficient and elegant. You build things to survive, no matter what happens to them." The battle was beginning to turn. What had started as an ambush by overwhelming enemy forces was becoming a rout. Hegemony ships that had expected an easy victory were now fleeing in panic as the human vessel continued its relentless assault. But the Defiant was paying a price for its incredible performance. Warning lights flashed across every control panel. On the bridge, the ship's hull was cracked in dozens of places, and several critical systems were operating far beyond their design limits. "Captain," Amy reported, "we have lost life support on decks 3 and 4. Hull breaches on 5 different levels. And sir, the main reactor is showing signs of instability." Jake looked at his tactical display. They had destroyed or disabled over 80 enemy ships, but there were still more than 100 vessels in the Hegemony fleet. The diplomatic convoy was safe for now, but the Defiant could not keep fighting at this intensity much longer. "How much time do we need to buy for the convoy to escape?" he asked. "At least another 10 minutes, sir," Amy calculated. "Maybe 15 to be completely safe," Jake nodded grimly. "Then we keep fighting. Ben, give me everything this old ship has got left." The final phase of the battle began when Admiral Vector made his last desperate gamble. With half his fleet destroyed or fleeing, he ordered all remaining ships to concentrate their fire on the human vessel. If they could destroy the Defiant, they might still salvage something from this disaster. Over 90 Hegemony warships turned their weapons toward the old human ship. The combined firepower was enough to crack a moon in half. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and quantum torpedoes all converged on a single target that looked like it was already falling apart. Jake Morrison saw the attack coming on his tactical display. There was nowhere to run, and no way to avoid the massive barrage heading toward his ship. The Defiant's magnetic field generators were already operating beyond their limits. Her hull was cracked and bleeding atmosphere into space. Most of her secondary systems had failed completely. "All hands, brace for impact," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "This is going to be rough." The enemy weapons struck the Defiant like the hammer of an angry god. The magnetic fields absorbed what energy they could, but there was simply too much firepower focused on one target. Explosions rocked the ship from bow to stern. The lights went out on 3 different decks, and the artificial gravity failed in several sections. But the old human ship refused to die. Ben Carter fought to keep the fusion reactor stable as power. Levels fluctuated wildly throughout the ship. Pipes burst around him, filling the engine room with superheated steam. Electrical panels exploded in showers of sparks. But 40 years of engineering experience had taught him how to keep systems running when everything else was falling apart. "Captain," Ben's voice was barely audible over the noise of failing equipment. "Reactor core is holding, but I cannot give you much more. We are running on hope and spare parts at this point." Amy Rodriguez stayed at her weapons station even as smoke filled the bridge and warning alarms blared from every direction. Her targeting computer had failed 10 minutes ago, so she was aiming the ship's guns by sight and instinct. It was not as accurate as computer-controlled fire, but it was more flexible. "Captain, I have got firing solutions on the remaining command ships," she reported through gritted teeth. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew that had followed him into this impossible fight. They were beaten, battered, and exhausted. Their ship was held together by determination and engineering skill, but they were still fighting. "Fire everything we have left," Jake ordered. The Defiant's main cannon spoke one last time with a voice like thunder. The projectile, accelerated by energy stolen from enemy weapons, crossed the distance to Admiral Victar's flagship in less than a second. It struck the enemy command center with such force that the entire forward section of the dreadnought simply disintegrated. Secondary weapons joined the barrage, pouring fire into the remaining hegemony vessels. Industrial lasers cut through armor plating. Mining charges exploded against enemy hulls. Even the ship's point defense systems, designed to stop small meteors, were turned into weapons against fighter craft. The hegemony fleet broke. Ships that had come to destroy a diplomatic convoy now fled in panic from a single human vessel that should have been scrap metal floating in space. Some tried to surrender, but their communications were jammed by the nebula's interference. Others simply activated their faster-than-light drives and disappeared, abandoning their comrades to escape the nightmare that the old human ship had become. In less than 20 minutes, the Defiant had destroyed or scattered an entire enemy fleet. The battle that should have ended in massacre had become a legend that would be told across the galaxy for generations. But victory came at a terrible price. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and surveyed the damage reports flooding in from every section of his ship. The fusion reactor was on the edge of critical failure. Life support was working in only half the ship. The hull had been breached in 23 different places. It would need months of repairs before the Defiant would be space-worthy again. "Captain," Amy reported, "I am receiving transmission requests from every ship in the diplomatic convoy. And sir, long-range sensors are picking up incoming Council battle fleets." "Word of the battle has already spread," Jake nodded slowly. The immediate danger was over, but the consequences of what they had done here would echo for years to come. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Commander Lisa Parker was the first alien commander to board the Defiant after the battle ended. She walked through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, past human crewmen, working to repair systems that should have failed hours ago. When she reached the bridge, she found Captain Morrison calmly reviewing damage reports as if nothing unusual had happened. "Captain Morrison," she said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for your actions today. You saved not just our lives, but the future of diplomatic relations between our species." Jake looked up from his reports. "We just did our job, Commander. Nothing more, nothing less." "What you did here was impossible," Lisa insisted. "Your ship should have been destroyed in the first minute of combat. How did you achieve such results with such primitive technology?" Jake smiled tiredly. "The hegemony made one crucial mistake, Commander. They forgot that humans do not build ships to look pretty or to impress anyone. We build them to survive, to adapt, and to fight when everything else fails." In the weeks that followed, the story of the Defiant's impossible victory spread throughout the galaxy. The ship that everyone had ignored became a legend, proof that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their diplomacy. It was their refusal to give up when the odds were impossible. The Galactic Council's attitude toward humanity shifted overnight. No longer were humans seen as primitive newcomers to be patronized. They were recognized as a species that could take old, obsolete technology and turn it into something formidable through sheer determination and cleverness. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew returned to Earth as heroes. But the Defiant herself was retired to a place of honor. Her battle-scarred hull became a monument to human persistence, and her legacy inspired a new generation of ship designers who understood that sometimes the best technology was the kind that refused to quit. The ship everyone ignored had become the ship no one would ever forget.